Alright, if you're thinking about buying a luxury SUV in 2026, we need to have an honest conversation before you sign anything. Because what feels impressive on day one does not always feel smart in year 5. The lighting, the badge, the smooth test drive, that part is easy. What most people don't slow down to examine is depreciation, long-term reliability, and what the market thinks of that vehicle once the excitement fades. And that's where mistakes happen. Some luxury SUVs truly justify their price. Others quietly drain value in ways buyers only understand later. So in this breakdown, we're going to walk through 3 that raise serious caution, and then 4 that consistently prove their worth over time. Let's get into it. Worst number 3, Volkswagen Tiguan. So let's begin with something that may surprise a few people. The Volkswagen Tiguan is not marketed as ultra-luxury. It presents itself as refined, European, well-balanced, and practical. And on paper, it checks many reasonable boxes. The design is clean. The interior layout feels organized. Pricing starts far below the 6-figure territory of other vehicles on this list, which makes it appear like a safer financial choice. But value is not just about starting price, it is about retention. Over a 5-year window, the Tiguan has historically lost a substantial portion of its value, often approaching the mid-40% range, depending on trim and market conditions. In practical terms, that means nearly half of what you paid may not return to you at resale. In a segment where competitors sometimes hold value more firmly, that gap matters. Fuel economy is respectable for the class, averaging in the mid-20s combined. So operating cost at the pump is not the core concern. The concern tends to revolve around long-term reliability consistency and resale confidence. Owners have reported issues ranging from oil consumption irregularities to electronic glitches and transmission hesitation. Not every vehicle experiences these problems, but the pattern appears often enough to influence buyer perception in the used market. And resale value is largely about perception. When second or third owners hesitate, prices adjust accordingly. The Tiguan is comfortable, practical, and easy to live with in the short term. For a lease or shorter ownership cycle, the financial exposure may feel manageable. But for buyers intending to hold the vehicle well beyond warranty coverage, the depreciation curve and reliability variability deserve careful attention. This is not a dramatic failure, it is something more subtle. A vehicle that feels reasonable up front, but loses ground more quickly than many expect. And that quiet erosion is what places it at number 3 on this list. Worst number 2, Mercedes-Benz GLE. Now, this is where the conversation becomes more serious. The Mercedes-Benz GLE is not an entry-level vehicle trying to compete on price. It begins in the low to mid $60,000 range and climbs well past $80,000 once options or AMG trims enter the picture. Buyers step into the GLE expecting refinement, engineering depth, and long-term brand confidence. In many ways, it delivers on day one. The interior feels solid. The dual-screen layout is polished. The ride is controlled and composed. But ownership is not judged on first impressions. Recent reliability data has placed the GLE under scrutiny, particularly in newer model years. Reported issues have included transmission irregularities, infotainment system instability, and electronic accessory malfunctions. None of these problems are catastrophic on their own, but modern luxury vehicles rely heavily on integrated systems. When one area falters, it rarely remains isolated. Depreciation is also more aggressive than many buyers assume. Luxury midsize SUVs typically lose value faster than mainstream vehicles, and the GLE follows that pattern. Within 5 years, resale values can soften considerably, especially once the warranty period narrows and used buyers begin calculating potential repair exposure. Fuel economy remains average for the class, but maintenance cost is where the curve shifts. Advanced suspension systems, complex electronics, and higher output powertrains mean service and repair bills reflect the badge. This is where purchase strategy matters. Leasing within warranty coverage contains risk. Financing long-term requires a higher tolerance for variability. The GLE drives beautifully and carries undeniable presence. The question is whether the ownership pattern aligns with expectations of stability, and that distinction is what moves it above the Tiguan on this list. Worst number 1, Maserati Levante. Now we arrive at the vehicle that carries the highest financial exposure on this list. The Maserati Levante does not try to compete quietly. It announces itself through sound, styling, and exclusivity. Starting prices typically move well into 6 figures once realistically equipped, and higher trims push far beyond that. On the surface, it feels rare. It feels distinctive. It feels like something few others will have. And that is exactly why buyers are drawn to it. But 5-year ownership tells a different story. Depreciation for the Levante is steep, often exceeding half of its original value within that window. When you combine that with maintenance, insurance, and fuel costs, total ownership figures rise quickly into territory that demands careful consideration. A large portion of what is paid upfront does not remain in retained value. Fuel economy averages in the mid-teens combined, which steadily adds to operating cost. More important, however, is reliability consistency. Electrical irregularities, suspension component failures, and recurring warning indicators have appeared frequently enough in owner discussions to shape resale perception. Once warranty coverage narrows, repair invoices reflect the luxury positioning. There is also the historical context of shared corporate components during earlier production cycles, which created a disconnect between brand perception and underlying architecture. Buyers paying for exclusivity often expect engineering that feels equally exclusive. The Levante is not without strengths. It delivers presence and character that few competitors replicate, but financially, it demands tolerance for volatility. If approached as a short-term experience, the equation may be manageable. If purchased with long-term stability in mind, the exposure becomes significant, and that cumulative exposure is why it holds the #1 position on the worst list. Now let's slow this down and reset the lens, because not every SUV follows the same ownership curve. The 3 we just discussed carry measurable financial exposure through depreciation, repair variability, or long-term cost structure. But the market is not entirely unstable. There are vehicles that behave differently over 5 years. They hold value more consistently. They show stronger reliability patterns. They inspire more confidence in the used market. The difference is not emotional. It is structural. So instead of focusing on what erodes value, let's look at what protects it, starting with number 4. Best number 4, Subaru Crosstrek. Now here's where things get practical. The Subaru Crosstrek does not rely on a luxury badge to justify itself. It relies on behavior, and over 5 years, behavior is what protects your money. Starting in the mid-20s and moving upward depending on trim, it enters the market at a realistic price point. But what makes it stand out is not just entry cost, it is how it performs after year 3 when depreciation and ownership patterns begin to separate the stable vehicles from the fragile ones. Historically, the Crosstrek has held its value better than many compact competitors. Used demand stays strong, partly because standard all-wheel drive is not an add-on, it is built in. That consistency builds trust in the resale market, and resale trust is what keeps depreciation controlled. Fuel economy typically lands in the high 20s combined, which keeps operating cost predictable. Maintenance patterns have also remained comparatively steady, especially when measured against turbocharged or highly complex alternatives in the segment. Inside, it is practical rather than flashy. The layout is clean. The visibility is strong. The technology is updated but not overloaded, and sometimes restraint is an advantage. Fewer over-engineered systems can mean fewer long-term surprises. The Crosstrek is not trying to dominate the luxury conversation. It is trying to remain dependable in real ownership. And for buyers who prioritize stability over status, that consistency matters. That is why it earns the 4th position. Best number 3, Mazda CX-50. Now let's step slightly upward. The Mazda CX-50 appeals to buyers who want something more refined than purely practical, but without stepping into high-risk ownership territory. It carries stronger design presence than many compact rivals. The proportions are confident, the interior materials feel deliberate, and unlike some brands that lean heavily into oversized screens and layered software, Mazda has taken a more controlled approach. But what places the CX-50 here is not styling, it is balance. Pricing typically begins in the low 30s and rises with higher trims or turbocharged options. Depreciation has historically remained moderate rather than aggressive, and resale demand has held steady in the compact segment. That matters because used buyers tend to respond well to vehicles that feel premium without carrying premium repair anxiety. Standard all-wheel drive reinforces market appeal, especially in colder regions. Fuel economy remains competitive, generally landing in the mid to high 20s combined depending on configuration. More importantly, the ownership curve has not shown the same volatility seen in some turbo-heavy competitors. There is also a structural advantage in restraint. Mazda's approach to technology integration tends to prioritize usability over constant software layering. Over 5 years, that simplicity can translate into fewer electronic complications. This is not the most conservative option on the list. It carries personality, but it does so without inviting the kind of long-term instability that undermines resale. For buyers who want design presence and daily drivability without stepping into unpredictable predictable repair patterns, the CX-50 holds its position firmly at number 3. Best number 2, Toyota RAV4. Now, this is where predictability becomes measurable. The Toyota RAV4 is not positioned as an emotional purchase. It does not rely on exclusivity or dramatic styling to carry its value. What carries it is demand. Year after year, the RAV4 remains one of the highest-selling SUVs in its segment. That volume is not accidental. It reflects buyer confidence, and buyer confidence directly affects resale behavior. Starting in the high 20s and moving upward depending on trim and hybrid configuration, the RAV4 enters at a practical price point. Over 5 years, depreciation has historically remained controlled compared to many competitors. Used buyers actively look for it, and when demand remains strong, resale strength follows. Fuel economy is one of its clearest advantages. Standard models deliver solid combined figures, while hybrid variants move significantly higher, often into territory that rivals smaller vehicles. That efficiency shapes ownership cost beyond the first year. It reduces operating expense while maintaining market appeal. Reliability history is another stabilizing factor. Toyota's reputation is not built on marketing. It is built on long-term durability patterns that consistently place it near the top of dependability rankings. That perception reinforces used market pricing because buyers expect lower long-term risk. Inside, the RAV4 is functional rather than extravagant. Technology is present but not overwhelming. The hybrid system in particular has matured over multiple generations, which supports long-term confidence. This is not the SUV that dominates social media. It dominates resale tables. And that sustained market trust is why it holds the number 2 position on this list. Best number 1, Lexus RX/RX Hybrid. Now we arrive at the vehicle that consistently separates luxury perception from luxury stability. The Lexus RX does not need dramatic reinvention every year to remain relevant. It has built something far more powerful than trend appeal. It has built long-term trust. Starting in the low to mid $50,000 range depending on trim, and climbing higher with hybrid or performance variants, the RX enters the luxury space with pricing that reflects its positioning. But what distinguishes it is what happens after purchase. Over 5 years, the RX has historically retained value more strongly than most luxury competitors. Depreciation remains controlled relative to the segment, and resale demand stays consistent. Used buyers actively seek it out. That is not marketing momentum. That is ownership history shaping behavior in the secondary market. Reliability plays a central role here. Lexus has repeatedly ranked near the top of dependability studies, and the RX benefits directly from that track record. Hybrid variants add another layer of advantage. Fuel economy often exceeds 35 miles per gallon combined in certain configurations, reducing long-term operating cost while maintaining performance appropriate for daily driving. Inside, the RX prioritizes comfort and refinement without layering excessive complexity. The ride is composed. The cabin remains quiet even at highway speeds. The technology is integrated but not experimental. And over time, that restraint supports durability. There is a reason the RX has remained one of the best-selling luxury SUVs for years. Owners keep them. Many push beyond 150,000 miles with manageable maintenance patterns. That longevity feeds resale confidence, and resale confidence protects value. If the Levante represents emotional risk and the GLE represents sophisticated uncertainty, the RX represents structural consistency. It may not shout the loudest. It does something more important. It holds its ground. And in a 5-year ownership conversation, that is what defines the king. So here's where this leaves us. Luxury is easy to admire in the first 12 months. The materials feel solid. The performance feels justified. The brand carries weight. But 5 years is where perception either holds up or begins to fracture. Depreciation exposes overpricing. Repair frequency exposes engineering decisions. Resale behavior exposes market trust. The 3 SUVs we discussed at the beginning carry measurable financial exposure. That does not mean every owner will struggle. It means the ownership curve requires a higher tolerance for variability. The 4 that followed behave differently. They retain value more consistently, demonstrate steadier reliability patterns, and inspire stronger demand in the used market. And that difference is not cosmetic. It is structural. Before you commit to a luxury SUV in 2026, ask a simple question. How will this vehicle look at year 5, not month 5? If this breakdown gave you clarity, let me know in the comments which SUV you would trust long-term. And if you want more ownership-focused reviews instead of surface-level impressions, subscribe. We'll keep analyzing what actually holds up, not just what looks good at delivery. Choose carefully.